Good morning, good morning, good morning. It is another day of growth. That's what it is. And as always, with these wonderful days of growth, I have an incredible entrepreneur who's going to talk to you about ridiculous growth. Like normally it's 100% or 200% or something like kind of big. We're going to go way higher than that today. And I'm going to bring you, I think, actually, maybe the fastest growing company in Expert Dojo today. And you're going to speak to an incredible entrepreneur. The message around today is going to be very much around how do you build like incredible levels of credibility within your audience, spend the time to be able to do that so you can then create a product which is going to take over the world. It's huge, 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 huge growth. Before we go into that and before I bring Greg up and we really dig in, I want to talk about mindset because let me rewind back as we grew Expert Dojo from the beginning, at the start, we did it like a standard accelerator. Our view was, well, let's just replace all the kind of the BS mentorship stuff with really important things like growth, right? And let's try and learn as much as we can about growth, bring in some of the things we know, bring in some folks who are really good at growth, and then just really growth, 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 right? And then we did, okay, there are components of growth. What are those components of growth that we need to bring out? And we were like, okay, outbound, very important. Nobody will argue with us there. And when we get to outbound, we're talking about LinkedIn outreach, SDR outreach, cold calling, texting. Uh, I say email. If I didn't say email outreach as well. And what about social? What about direct natural search engine optimization? What about paid? So many things, partnerships, affiliates, everything else. So nobody would argue with us. I think what was good about some of the things that maybe we suggested was that it allowed people to focus on the numbers of the outcome. And then we're like, okay, second area, which is conversion. And the conversion is your brand, your purpose, your personal brand. It is your awareness. It's your the trust that's there for your product. All these wonderful things. All of these allow you to build a communication with the customer. Number three was obviously beautiful, 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 perfect product. And that is your ideal customer profile. It's like how you stay engaged with your customer. It's all those wonderful things. Next one, domain dominance. Domain dominance. We always loved domain dominance. And domain dominance was very much tied into how do you create this environment, which through Epic Productions, you get to domain dominance. And then we added two. One was because of us, right? We had all of these really good scores on this area, but our system score was terrible. And what we found out was the bigger we got, the more that systems became a defining factor as to whether a company, i.e., us, survives or not. And so we're like, shoot, we got to add systems. But the most recent one we've added, and I am absolutely huge on this right now, is headspace, mindset. It's like how you are. And this came to me for a few things. One, I'm watching the entrepreneurs who are not making it and the entrepreneurs who are making it. I'm watching how they're adapting to failure. And failure is a funny old word because it's always inside our own mind. Like we've never failed with a company until the product dies and we close it down. And even then, sometimes we haven't failed because sometimes we've learned enough to build another product which can do 5 times better. But a lot of people will look at failure and say, I failed because we didn't make our monthly quotas. Like that's a failure. I failed because we didn't get someone to agree with my sales presentation. Like that's a failure. My co-founder left me. That's a failure. I didn't hire the right people. That's a failure. And while there are other folks who will look at it in an entirely different way. And what really got me thinking of this was I was having a game of tennis with one of my buddies, and that person said, the 5 top people in the world have one characteristic in common, just one. I was like, great, I need that. And that characteristic is that after they make a mistake, they reinforce how good they are. So, for example, you might hit a forehand in the net, and they say, I have the most amazing forehand in the world. They might be slow to get to the ball, and they say, I am so fast at getting to the ball. But then they reenact the same thing being done really well. So, in otherwise, positive reinforcement from mindset becomes absolutely everything. Now, then you start saying, okay, what are the other areas of mindset that are really important? Well, first of all, the people that we surround ourselves with. If we have mediocre team members, if we have a mediocre environment, if we have a mediocre everything, then we're probably going to end up mediocre. Like slowly, our standards are going to reflect the kind of people that we're around. Same thing with the standards we have for what we're trying to achieve. Are we setting our standards, or are we trying to reach the maximum standards that are out there? So I want you, today is not going to be much about mindset, but I wanted to throw it out there because this founder that I've brought in is an incredible founder, not just because they're doing insane growth, like thousands of percent growth, but not just because of that, but because I remember when I met this founder on our balcony in Expert Dojo 2 or 3 years ago, when we made the investment into the company. And we made the investment into the company, but I still remember thinking at the time, I know he's an executor because he is one of the top specialist doctors in the country. I know he's like got an incredible pain and need because the healthcare in the United States is just like, it's so sad of where it's going to right now, and it's broken and it's not working. And he had a really good solution to it. And I knew it was a good deal because he had a plan to go to market. And I knew that his mindset and his space at that time was really, really, really good. And the hard thing was he was going to have to sell to large corporate enterprises and convince these people that they should convince this person that they've never known before, who has never worked directly in this space before, that he is the one to be able to take America through the other side, especially for self-funded groups. This is a really, really, really high bar for the thing. The other thing that really worried me is that I knew as a specialist, he can bring in millions of dollars a year in salaries as long as he just continues on the trajectory he's on. And in the short term in startup, he's going to earn nothing. Like, it's going to be absolutely miserable. And that in itself is an incredibly difficult thing to come over. So without me chatting for much longer, I am going to bring Mr. Gregory Caroll, should I say Dr. Gregory Caroll, into the studio. And we're going to talk about ClinNEXUS. And we're going to talk a little bit about mindset. I know we weren't going to today, Greg, but it's got to have been like an amazingly difficult thing to do. And then I want to really launch into like the two types of people who are listening to the show here are, number one, investors who just want to engage with startups that are growing at over 300% a year. Like, it's just, why not, right? And then they get to be here and they get to listen. The second group of people are startups themselves who are bought into the factor that if you can grow through having an incredible customer relationship, that is better than taking money from investors, right? And they just want to know how. And these Monday sessions for 30 or 40 minutes give them the ability to step into an entrepreneur's shoes who today is achieving it. It is not a, here's what I did 15 years ago and how I built what I built. Today, you are achieving it, and you are that guy. So welcome to the show. Let's start with mindset and talk about you walking away from like greatest job in the world that you had worked your entire life to get into this place where you have like a guaranteed amazing lifestyle, nice cars, nice house, nice hair. Well, you have a nice hair, but like you got it all going into early stage startup. And then we're going to go into the growth plan that you did to actually take you to where you are right now, which is an incredible place where you may never need to raise again.
Yeah. Thanks, Brian. And thank you for having me join the show. And gosh, mindset, everything. I think if I go back to your point, I mean, living a very comfortable lifestyle as an emergency physician, living in a beautiful city of Los Angeles, California, and on the beach, God bless, right? But I think, as I got into my career, it's really about the why. And the why is, no matter how hard I worked over that 8, 12, 14-hour shift within the four walls of the hospital, it was a losing proposition. Yes, we would make interventions, save lives, incredibly rewarding, valuable. But I also realized and knew that 80% of health doesn't happen within the four walls of the hospital or the emergency room. And so for me, over time, I'm like, gosh, no matter how hard I work, I don't know that I'm necessarily moving the needle of making people healthier. And so I knew the only way I could do that is to go outside of the four walls and address the issues that drive 80% of our health. which is actually not clinical. It's, do you have a roof over your head? Do you have food in the pantry? Do you have transportation to see your doctor or otherwise? So I made that decision. For me, financially, yeah, you've got to have your ducks in a row. You've got to be ready to make that transition financially in your life. You've got to probably scale down your costs and your living expenses. But for me, it was really, I was compelled to do this. And, thankfully it's working out.
Yeah. And then so at the beginning, you came into it and you're like, okay, I'm going to go for self-funded groups and I'm going to help these folks be able to get a better deal, right? Just as
Yeah.
simple as that. And and a better deal doesn't just equal cost, it also includes access. It also includes actually everything from people thinking that they might get ill, people taking care of people getting ill, and people then aftercare and taking ill. And at the beginning, I remember when we were out in the balcony, we were talking about like go to market. I was saying probably unhelpful things like you just got to hit those corporates and like hit them hard. And like one thing is saying that, but another thing is actually converting those folks into large scale deals. So our first GTM, talk to everybody about specifically what the product was and is, and
Yeah.
then talk a little bit about like what that original GTM was and then how you attacked that GTM. And then we're
Yeah.
going to talk about how you transitioned into like one of the most brilliant evolutions. Forget pivots. Pivots are bullshit. They don't count. Pivots are not something for glory. Evolutions are something to be glorified. And so you evolved on a huge level. But let's start at the beginning first.
Yeah, for sure. Well, really what we did in the beginning is, and to your point, when you're starting out, you've got to build trust and you don't have trust. And what I've seen too often in my career is where, especially in healthcare, where people will try and go after too much, right? They'll try and bite off too much of the value chain and really they're not able to generate that trust, right? Because you do this well, but not that well. You've got to find something. One, you got to listen to your customers, which we invested 2 years into just sitting down with large health systems, sitting down with health plans and saying, look, what's the weakest part of the value chain? What's the thing that's keeping you up at night? And across the board, it was, you know what, when people come out of the hospital in those first 30 days, man, gosh, you could spend $10,000, $100,000 on an inpatient stay. But once you discharge or send that person home, you bleed the value out of that care. I mean, it drops off. And really, health plans don't necessarily communicate well with primary care networks, and the doctors don't necessarily communicate with the hospital and the primary care side. So we identified the weakest part of that value chain, and that was that 30 days after coming out of the hospital. We knew that wasn't necessarily, from a financial perspective, the best opportunity. And you and I talked about that, Brian, right? It was fee for service. You're starting over every time when you deliver the service. But we knew if we could deliver on that part of the value chain, we would build trust. And with that trust, we knew that the stakeholders who all valued this part of the chain there would be opportunities for us. We strategically knew where we were going, but we needed to create that proof point. As you've said before, the reasons to believe, we needed to create that. And so we made that investment on our initial GTM. And that was just that 30 days after you leave the hospital, do that well. And then that we knew there was a broader play there beyond the 30 days. And that's the longitudinal care of people over time so they don't end up back in the emergency room in the hospital. And that was, I don't think it was a pivot other than build trust, create an ecosystem, create a network effect, and then capitalize on that. And that's where we are right now.
I love that. And one of the things I really like about how you've built out since then is that you've used, I mean, I see, I'll just throw that onto the screen. Mindset is really important at the beginning. And I want to, your mindset always was amazing to me because a lot of folks, especially in early stage startup, they live in a place of fear. And they live in a place of ego. We live in a place of ego, right? Ego is the biggest enemy to clear thinking. And a lot of folks think that like clear thinking is all about making the right decisions at the right time. Maybe outside startup, it might be, well, if I marry the right person, if I get the right job, if I go to the right college, like we think it's the big decisions that impact on where we go to, but it's actually the ordinary everyday decisions that we do every single minute of every single day. Like they're the ones that actually dictate on what really happens to us. Because whether we go to the best college or don't go to the best college, we still have access to like all of the people that we could. We can still be as smart as we could have been if we choose to read the right books, if we choose to go to other colleges. It's the ordinary decisions. And never has that been more defined than in startups. And so a lot of the times it's not even speaking to my startups, like speaking to myself. I question and second question, like every decision I make every single day. Who do I get to do what task? How quickly do I do a task? How long do I wait to do a negotiation? What decision factors did I have before I bring a deal in? And I loved how you do that. And I think the greatest enemy to doing that properly is our ego, and is the fact that a lot of the time we believe that we know stuff so well that we'll build it out and we'll do it and we make our decisions based on that. And that whole ego default is like a huge problem. And what was hugely surprising to me about you when you came in was the humility that you had, because it would be very easy for you to come in with an ego at the beginning. And I say this because it applies to everyone. It's huge for all of us. We all got to keep our egos in check and make sure that the decisions that we're making are being made on clear, unemotional decision making to get to the right outcome. But right at the beginning, when you came in, you're like, I'm not a doctor anymore. I'm not someone to be thought of as special. I'm someone who wants to save a larger multitude of lives. And that means that every single decision I'm going to be made is going to be focused on that. Just talk to me about like the mindset for a moment before we go back into the GTM again, and how you did that and how you brought, because like, just to clarify for everybody, your revenue has gone from $30,000 in revenue or so last year to what's it going to be this year? $2 or $3 million?
Probably well beyond that. Let's just put it that way. Yeah.
I mean, like, what are we even talking about? Like, it's thousands of percent of increase, right? And it's thousands of percent increase because of lots of small decisions that were made along the way. It's not one decision. It may feel like one decision because there was one thing happened that like pushed us that bit forward, but it was all of the smaller decisions. And actually, I think a lot of the times, Greg, I think we don't even remember the small decisions, but can you maybe throw some insight as to how this affected you?
Yeah, for sure. Well, I mean, it goes back to the conversations that you and I have had. And I think you've been a proponent of this mindset. And that mindset is each day. So my job is quote unquote the leader of I work for everyone on the team, but quote unquote as the leader, as the CEO of the company, I've got to make sure that we can live to fight another day, right? Do we have enough capital, right? Are we delivering value with the resources we have? But ultimately the mindset is, and this is one-on-one conversations, and this, we could talk about culture and how you build culture one-on-one. So with my team, it's very clear, like our goal is to survive each day, but we have to be smarter at the end of that day than we were when we woke up that morning. If my team or I make a mistake, hey, we made a mistake. We didn't lose the house. We learned. Let's not repeat that mistake, but let's take each. So each day you're really, and I think this humility comes into play, and that is each day almost starting over saying, gosh, I know something. There's a whole lot I don't know. I don't know what I don't know. Do I have a team? Do I have a system in place where we can capture those learnings? To your point, Brian, every one of those little decisions that we're making, do we have a way to capture that company knowledge? And do we have a way of making sure that one, we don't make a mistake again, or two, we double down on something we did really well that day? And so I think that learning mindset, that constant learning mindset, and having a team with a learning mindset that's not punitive if we make a mistake. It's, hey, we made a mistake if we didn't learn, right? If we did something that didn't go well, we didn't learn, that's a mistake. But if we did something and we learned and we're living to fight another day, now, thankfully, I think we're a little bit beyond the fight another day, but you always are. That's a huge mindset. And that's something that you have to have throughout your entire team. For all the frontline, the people that are directly connecting with our customers, all the way through, gosh, my finance team, my ops team, all of those people need to have a learning mindset. That's probably one of the most critical pieces, especially of starting. And to your point, a lot of physician entrepreneurs, they start a company or a healthcare concern, and they're really smart. And we're trained in med school and in residency to always have the answer, right? And so what happens is it makes it difficult for physicians or nurses or people that quote unquote know healthcare. They lose that learning mindset, and that can be poison for a startup.
I love that you said that. I love that you said that. It's so, I'm literally having this thing with my kid right now. I have become prouder and dumber every single month of every single year. Like if it was before, I remember at the very beginning of the dojo, and I was like, "Oh, we have all these answers, and we know." No, I didn't have the answer. I didn't have any answers, right? I knew nothing. And if I'd known today what I'd known now, I would have made sure everybody would have known that I knew nothing back then. Like it takes a maturity to actually get to a place of humility, which gets to a place of desire. And that desire, and it's almost like I mentioned our ego, and I think there's a wonderful book that Shane Parrish wrote, which is called Clear Thinking. And that book like digs into, remember I read it a while back, but they dig into like the Corleone family, and they talk about Vito Corleone, and they talk about how ego almost took down an entire crime. I'm trying to protect crime families here, but like it almost took down like an entire crime family because of ego. And this ego tells us, no, 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 don't be fragile, don't be weak. And actually the stupid thing is the ego is always the result of lower confidence or lower self-esteem. Like why at the very beginning of the dojo would I not have said, I don't know that our growth is that good, because my confidence would have been lower, my self-esteem would have been lower. But because of that, our ego goes higher. The less we believe in ourselves that we should be here, or that we have an imposter posturum, the more that M or effing like ego comes in and just fucks us up. And we got to be so careful. And so I love that you say it, because you're like saying, oh, you should have a learning, you should have a learning, you should have a learning. But the truth is, like, and everybody will like, yeah, okay, we should have a learning. No, you're not getting it. Like what Greg is saying here is everything. Hardly anybody has a mindset of, I'm going to go in every single day and I am going to learn and get better by the end of that day. That's my role. I am learning to be a better CEO, because the truth is, I am not worthy. I've never run a 1,000-person company before. Anybody else here run it? Okay, we're fucking imposters. All of us. Own it, live it, and learn, because we're forgiven for that at the beginning, because we have time to build up to a serious D round. And the more we learn, the more we will be able to do that. And by the way, the more we don't look like jerks, and the more great people want to be around us. So I wanted to incorporate that in, because I think it's like monster. And I love the way you've gone straight to learning. And if it's a takeaway for everybody here on the call, just say to yourself, how much of what I'm saying to people that I know do I really know? How much am I faking it to make it, which I absolutely hate? You don't have to do that. People don't like those people. They don't want them around them. It's actually a really nice name for being a liar. Okay. You don't have to be a liar. Like if you're honest and genuine and you tell people authentically what it is that you are able to achieve right now and what you want to do, you would be surprised how many people are going to want to help you. Okay. That piece was cool. Thank you so much. Let's go second piece. What did you do? Like, how did you break through? You worked on it for a year. You worked your ass off trying to break in with these groups. Like each interaction like took ages. And then suddenly you catapulted to this thing. Can you just tell us, like, in as much detail as you did, like you went after the corporates, like what does that mean? Did you email? Did you LinkedIn them? Did you like randomly bump into them at conferences? How did you then build that trust that you're talking about? And then what was it that was the difference between last year and this year?
Yeah, well, let's go back a couple of years now. I think there was definitely a remote mindset in terms of doing business, which God bless, you and I are remote right now, although I think you and I are probably 12 miles away from each other, but we're doing this by video. But I think, as we started doing business, 3 years ago, that remote mindset and the ability to build a company, look, it's incredibly valuable that we can reach across the country and pull in talent. That's so valuable. But I think some people lost a little bit of that understanding that sometimes, I would say often, showing up, and we heard this time and time again from health plans, from delivery networks, from the corporate group, if you will, where we would show up physically, get in the car. I would drive 5 hours north up to, if we had a customer in Monterey, California, I'd drive 5 hours up to Monterey, California, and I would show up. And it was astounding. And that I looked around and none of my competitors would be in the room. Right. And then we leaned into that. We started doing roundtables where we would bring, and look, the delivery, like a delivery executive and a health plan executive don't often get together. I mean, they might connect and it's usually very transactional, but we brought them together in person in these forums. These executives were starved to come into the same room and have conversations. So we can talk a little bit about why our opportunity is so huge right now. It's alignment. For 40 years, we've been promising that we're going to deliver value to the people who need it the most, right? We're going to meet them where they are in their homes. We're going to call them on the phone. We're going to show up at their door. And it's the same thing when you're managing executives in a large network or a large health plan. The power for us was showing up, creating a small ecosystem, but an ecosystem that trusted us, and an ecosystem that then went and sold us to other executives and other health plans and the state. And so I just can't speak enough, at least for us, those last 3 years of showing up, so valuable. And then to your point, because once you show up, God, you got someone's personal cell phone number, you're then into a texting relationship. You're then, instead of like having these big presentations, you're having daily or every other day or every week exchanges with these influencers within that ecosystem. And so it started with showing up, creating those relationships, creating a virtuous cycle, if you will, within the ecosystem, and then getting to a point where I could just pick up the phone anytime, text someone anytime, and we would start moving the needle, I think, quicker than our competitors. So that's
where do you get
detailed.
And where does it go to next? And now you've built up the relationships, you've shown up. We've covered 2 huge topics here. The first one is that mindset, like that ability to keep on wanting to learn and learn to understand the problems. The second one is like continue to show up. What happens next? Like, how do you build this up to being $30-40 million a year? And do you even need to raise money anymore?
Yeah. So I think it's interesting, right? 2023 was probably not a great year to be a seed stage start concern. I think probably there's people in your portfolio that would agree, right? Again, I'm the son of a real estate developer. I saw my father go through 4 cycles of real estate in this country and survive and thrive. And so I understood that, and what he always taught me was, that's, that when that cycle gets to the bottom, raising capital, there's an opportunity there. It's on you to find that opportunity. For us, there is grant dollars that are available in the state of California for this program that we're doing and we're focused on. I built a grant team. I stopped going on the road and pitching VCs. No offense, Brian. And I started investing in us writing grants and building a team that could write grants. And so what happened was, and you're on the cap table. So, what happened was we didn't need diluted funding. We were bringing in payments. We would write grants for our partners in this ecosystem, which further created credibility and trust. And then we were then able to bring in non-dilutive capital that allowed us to start delivering these services and also allowed us to really go into a hyperscale mode. And that can't be understated, the value of that. But it was a decision. It was a decision. Like, look, we can keep beating down the doors of VCs, or we can write grants and we can bring in non-dilutive capital which actually attracts more VCs over time. If we
Yes.
choose. We're not in a position where we're not raising right now, but with the right partners, the right strategic investments, we're open to those conversations.
And just for folks who are joining right now, we're talking about a company here, ClinNEXUS, that has grown from $30,000 in revenue in 2023 to a likely $3 million plus, maybe $4, maybe $5 million this year. You're talking thousands of percent increase. And again, we go back to mindset. And if mindset with investors is a place of desperation, which it is for most founders, like most founders had a bad year in 2023 because they sound desperate. And they sound desperate because they are desperate. Like, and it's not just you, it's like VCs the same. You see the desperation, you smell the desperation. It's the same with dating, finding a job, and raising money. It's the same thing. You just see that person and you run 1,000 miles from them. And so the right mindset is allowing yourself, going back to what I said at the start, it's the everyday decisions that you make. It may have seemed a small decision for Greg to say, I'm not going to spend all of my time fundraising for these jackasses to give me absolutely the same answer they've given me for the last X amount of time. And instead, he went out and got better money because he positioned it with a clear mindset with no dilution. And then he realized he can use that as a tool which will actually be beneficial to the companies who buy his products as well at the same time. And I love there, Jim has brought up a really good point that I just want to, I want to throw that up. Jim brought up a really good point, which I just want to put up here, which is, yes, Jim, that's right. Most people don't. That is the terrible solution. I actually did a podcast this week where one of the guys is like, Brian, what do you think is going to be the biggest trend that we're going to see in venture in investing for the next while? I'm like, it's going to be investing in things that don't treat customers like shit. That's what it's going to be, because life has gone to hell. Nobody turns up anymore. Definitely nobody gives good customer service. And bots have taken over the world, which is all well and good and dandy. But let's be honest, like there's no bot, of having love relationships with people right now. Like it's just miserable what we get. And our lives are getting cheaper while everything gets more expensive on the other end. And so I love what you're saying there. You turn up all the time for your customers, all the time. You focused on like logical, small decisions, which led you to this point. And now you're in a stage where you're like, no, like maybe I'll do a Series A, maybe I won't do a Series A. Like, I don't really care. If we do a Series A, we're just doing people a favor. That's the startup that you want to have. That's the startup you all want to have. Focus on your customers. Small, clear decision-making moments all day, every day. Showing up, like Greg says. Making sure that you're providing them what they need. Making sure that you yourself are not in a place of desperation, that you're in a place of growth with your customers because you're always maintaining that communication with them. What else would you throw in there, Greg? What are the other areas that you would say would speak to the success and why you've grown at such a massive clip?
Yeah, I mean, I think as an entrepreneur, we're often, you've got to be opportunistic, of course, right? You've got to, but ultimately there has to be a higher level of thinking, right? And that's strategy, right? And strategy is, I think people, I don't know that everyone necessarily understands strategy, what it really is, right? Strategy is really a series of decisions, integrated decisions that you make. The essence of like what you aren't, what aren't you, right? And it's positioning yourself in the market, and it's a collection of decisions to where are you going to position yourself in the market, right? So initially we made a series of decisions to really tackle that weakest part of the value chain. That look, we could move the needle, we could create reasons to believe, we could create confidence, trust, all those things. But then we also had to be disciplined and come together as a team. And I say team because this isn't me doing a top down or me and the board telling the team what. It's working with the team of what are we and what are we not? What are those series of choices that we're going to make strategically to position ourselves to where we think the hockey puck's going, right? To use the metaphor of skating to the puck. I think probably attributed to Gretzky, I think, right? And really that's for us coming together saying, well, we know that there's a trend in healthcare to move toward more care coordination, keeping people out of the emergency department, out of the hospital, addressing the 85% of what drives health: roof over your head, food on the table, your kids are getting in for immunizations, all those things that make the household truly healthy. We made a series of decisions to position ourselves around that. We knew there was funded legislation. We knew that as California goes, often the rest of the country goes. So we positioned ourselves to move from just that small part of the value chain to a bigger part of the value chain. And that is more longitudinal care. So going from fee for service, we only get paid when we deliver the service for 30 days, moving to what are called capitated payments, where we contract for 12 months to service a member, a patient, a person, if you will. And that's recurring revenue. That's monthly recurring predictable revenue. And if you build an engine to enroll and you've done your homework around creating an ecosystem, you're able to drive down customer acquisition costs, and you're able to start enrolling members, hopefully at a high rate, which we've been able to, but also being able to then start getting paid prospectively for the work, if you will, versus retrospectively and less predictably. So that was a huge piece, and it was really moving our services more broad, building out a team that could work remote, but could then also go knock on someone's door. If you want to figure out if someone's living healthily, one of the most important things you can do is show up at their home and be invited in and say, oh, now I understand why this person's maybe not healthy. Oh, there are food vouchers to get that pantry filled. Oh, there are transportation vouchers to get you.
Okay, yeah.
You know.
Like, because this is too cool. Like, this is not a questionnaire, everybody. This is not like a questionnaire you send out to customers. Are you happy with our service? Do you think we're doing a good job? Are we a good company? That stuff doesn't matter. It's BS. The only people who respond are people who either tell you what they really want you to hear, or people who want to hate on you, neither of which are useful to you. Like, I love what you're saying there, which is like you going into the home of your customer's customer so you can understand like how they live. What is the pain that they're suffering on a daily basis? Because a lot of the time they don't know the answer to the question, but you can tell by actually going to that place. So you are deeply going in. And I really, really like this, because everything you're talking about here speaks to getting rid of an ego system and replacing it with an ecosystem, right? I cannot stress this enough.
Yeah.
Your first job as an entrepreneur is to destroy your ego, burn it, never to be reborn again. Your ego has to die, right? And then you have to build an ecosystem, and an ecosystem is your commitment. It's like a freaking Magna Carta. Like, it's your commitment to a certain specific things that will happen in the future that are all based on learning and making sure that you become better and better and better and better and better at understanding the needs of your patients. And then you make small decisions every single day that take you to a place where suddenly it seems like you're an overnight success, but you're an overnight success after 5,000 small decisions, which are based on building a lovable product, because you are obsessing over your customer and you are spending all of your time learning. This stuff is huge, but it requires a really special mindset. And for everybody listening, if you want to know the difference between a unicorn, now let's forget the unicorns where mommy and daddy gave them a unicorn because they went to a nice school and because like their mommy and daddy worked in Sequoia or Lightspeed and stuff. I mean real unicorns where people build out companies from scratch, raising a little bit of money, but then building it out just for turbo, but building it out because their customers love what they're doing. Like, I'm talking those unicorns. They build those unicorns because of that formula we're talking about right here. Not because they're better at emailing or because they had more paid advertising or because they raised money. It's because of this. They built out an ecosystem. And I really like Jim mentioned, 90% of people turning up. Andre, which I put up before, I also really like that comment. This communication, while you're building out this ecosystem, is phenomenally important, both PR communication, internal communication to your team as to what's expected, and also communication to your customers and future customers about why you're doing the things you need. But I love that you're talking about literally going into their homes to see what they look like. So your important, clear thinking daily decision making reflects the realities of life and not some bullshit presentation which gets put together.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, no, it's absolutely true. And I love that. I think Andre's comment of it only takes one person who can change your life forever. It's so true. And again, the egolessness and like, you don't know what you don't know on almost everything you're working on. And, yeah, you can go through the literature. Yeah, there's data out there. We do all that. Don't get me wrong. Like, it's not random, but that's not enough. Like that's just a foundation of having a general understanding of like, are we working in the right space? And then, but ultimately, like that one person who can change everything. I can't tell you how many times in our journey where it's been Brian, and Brian, you were one of those people, right? And then you were skeptical, I think, as you were contemplating bringing us into the portfolio. And until I showed up and you and I sat down in person, you didn't get it. And then you got it. Right. And I could have like taken an ego position and said, well, screw those guys. I'm going to go work out. I'm going to go elsewhere. But I'm like, hey, I'm going to sit down with this person and I'm going to understand like how they're thinking, what they're thinking about, and not necessarily hard selling them. So anyway, I thought that comment on one person can change your life forever is a really good comment.
It's beautiful. And look, you're a stone cold killer. I have nothing but mad respect for everything that you've built. Greg, can you finish this off with maybe like, if you're going to take 60 seconds of advice, and by the way, for also so people can contact you, please let them have your details. But if you're going to give like 60 seconds or 2 minutes of advice to like all of the entrepreneurs listening for the journey that you've gone through, you've shared with us like a ton so far. Maybe just drop us some really nice gifts of things that you would say to entrepreneurs. You're going to get to 3 to 5 million this year. Next year, you're going to hit what?
Yeah. Well, let's just say well beyond that. Yep.
A lot beyond that, and the year after beyond that as well. So talk to people about how they do what you did.
Yeah. I think especially for the founders on the call, you've got a couple jobs that it takes, I think, a fairly high level of thinking, right? You've got to hold opposing ideas in your mind, right? You've got to make sure the lights stay on, right? So you're in survival mode. So your job is to manage the downside risk early on. Do we have enough money to keep the lights on? Do we have enough money to bring on the right talent at the right time? Because if you miss that, that can be devastating. So there's a lot of managing downside risk, but at the same time, you've got to create space for your team where they feel safe to maximize their learning. And I know I've already said this, but I can't say it enough. And that is not having a punitive environment where if we make a mistake, as long as we didn't lose the house, we made that mistake, we learned from it, and we either stop doing that or we double down on the thing we did well. That's success. And that's culture, right? That's culture. Culture it's not a manifesto. Culture is it's your one-on-one meetings, and those one-on-one meetings with your team, early on, I made sure that I had one-on-ones with everyone in the organization. And then over time that became unsustainable. And so I moved away from that a little bit. But if I did my job right early on, that actually creates another network effect. And that is those team members then are doing one-on-ones with the people that report to them or otherwise. And that's how you build culture. And it's really, I can't say enough about the learning mindset, acknowledging we don't know what we don't know, managing that downside risk, but making sure that every day you're learning. Learning's cool, but really what's it about? Learning's value. Are you building value in your company? And are you building value, most importantly, for the lives that we're impacting and saving? And one thing I will say is, and I'll pause, Brian, and that is celebrating successes within your team. We have a monthly Bright Spots that comes from the front lines. These are our care managers who are on the front line every day. They're going into the homes. We have a little competition by who can report the most bright spots. And those bright spots are, I went into this home, there were 3 children, there wasn't enough food in the pantry, mom didn't have transportation to get them to the clinic. We did XYZ. Oh, and by the way, we enrolled the other 2 children in the family into the program. And really making sure that we're celebrating those successes, communicating it to the management team, communicating it to the board. I'll tell you, boards are great. You got to manage them. One thing is get them bright spots and experiences from the front lines. That is super valuable because ultimately you want to make sure everyone on that team is aligned, and sharing the successes in an organic, authentic way is incredibly valuable around that. Plus it keeps you motivated and going because, this shit's hard.
Yeah, it's hard. I love that. I mean, Sunil asked a question, which I'll just answer very quickly as we're wrapping up here, but I didn't put it in the chat yet. But like, most crucial aspect for a health startup: patient protection and market entry strategy, both. You got to protect your patients.
Well, we could have a whole conversation on.
We could. That's why I didn't put it up. Yeah.
Testing and look, I mean, there's a comment on patent. It's good. That's too deep for us right now, but like, there's a lot of value there, and people don't understand that there's a lot more there in terms of patent protection, and it can be really helpful for your business. Patient
protection. I'll put it up. So look, nice job here. Oh, I'm going to throw one other one up. I'll put up. Look, patient protection. Oh, patent protection. Sorry, it was patent protection.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I can talk about patient protection or patent protection, either one.
I think for patient protection, it's really nice because it adds in, look, if you can answer that real fast, and then I'll say the final words. Do you have anything to add on that really quickly?
Look, patient safety and clinical quality in healthcare are table stakes. Your team, they are table stakes. And I think, especially when clinicians initially start becoming entrepreneurs, they get very focused on that, as they should be, but that's table stakes, right? You've got to be, there's got to be safety and quality that you're delivering to the market. And then you've got to make hard decisions from a business perspective to keep that going. Market entry strategy. You've got to understand the market. Healthcare is very complex. The health plan doesn't necessarily have the same incentive as the delivery side, don't necessarily have the same incentives even as the patients or the members of the health plan. So you've got to get really good, and you've got to spend a lot of time understanding what those incentives are. Because in healthcare, it's really hard to align all the incentives. But if you do, you get to a position where we are, where you just start to unlock massive value.
Yeah. And also, the lovely thing about what you've done is that it's not about, like, patents can't be protected anyway, by the way, just so you know. Like, if you try and protect a patent against Johnson & Johnson, God bless you. Like, you're wasting your time. You know the best patent that you can have? A customer who loves you. That's the best patent you can have. Go to market. Don't be a wussy. Don't be holding back because you're thinking, well, I want to go into stealth and I want to do this. With the exception of very, very small examples, 99% of everybody else, go out there and own the entire market and nobody will take it away from you. And so I want to just wrap everything that Greg has said into, thank you. Yeah, Greg's amazing. And look, I want to wrap everything in here with just a couple of little things. Firstly, a summary. We're talking about a company here that has gone from $30,000 in revenue last year to $3 million in revenue this year, which will have a multiple of that next year and a multiple of that the following year. We're talking about a unicorn in the making here. And Dr. Gregory Caroll has done that. And he is a stone cold killer when it comes to executing strategy. We have covered through the call about fake it, never. Not till you make it, never. You never fake it. Build a great company and build authentic people around you, which reflects your authenticness on the way. We've talked about never let your ego replace your ecosystem, replace your ecosystem. Most of us don't even know when our defense mechanisms to low self-confidence and low self-esteem, which is ego, are taking over. And our ego is incredibly skilled at convincing us that what we are doing is right. Never, ever let that happen. all of the decisions that help you go from $30,000 a month to $30,000 a year to $3 million a year are all small decisions, small, clear thinking decisions, which are made every single day, not based on a social response, not based on an emotional response, not based on an ego response, based on a clear, logical thinking response. You can only do that if you're in a place of learning, which comes from destroying, burning, killing, decapitating your ego in the first place, and making sure that your entire team know that you are in this incredible place of learning, because by osmosis, they are too. And when you move into this incredible place of learning, what then happens is you start moving into an incredible place of serving, because you start serving your customers in a way, because you can't learn from them if you're not serving them incredibly well. And by serving them and then by learning from them, you then build beautiful, gorgeous, incredible, just mind-blowing, lovable product. ClinNEXUS did it through Greg. All of you entrepreneurs can do it out there as well. Be real, be authentic, build a great company his way, not the other way. Okay. Thank you. That's a wrap. I appreciate you, Greg. You're killer, man.
Yeah. Thank you, Brian. Thank you, everyone.